It started as a normal Wednesday afternoon, with the soft hum of the air conditioner in the background and the steady rhythm of the clock ticking away on the wall. I had been sitting by the window, looking out at the small garden in my backyard, watching the leaves rustle gently in the wind. My life had always been calm, predictable, and for the most part, satisfying. But that afternoon, everything changed. I had always prided myself on being a good mother, a supportive figure in the lives of my children, Mark and Sophie. For years, I had been their safety net, the one they turned to when life became too much. Whether it was a loan for their house, money for their car repairs, or simply picking up the pieces when things went wrong, I had always been there, ready to help. It was just what I did. I was the one who took care of everything. It felt like my role, my purpose, to ensure they had everything they needed. But that afternoon I received a text message that made me question everything. It was from Sophie, my daughter-in-law. At first, it seemed like one of those typical requests for help that had become so common over the years. But as I read her words, my heart sank. "Mom, we need to talk about the money. It's time to stop. We can't keep relying on you anymore." The words hit me harder than I expected. Sophie had always been demanding, but I had never imagined she would ask me to stop helping them. The realization that they wanted me to stop after all the years of giving, all the sacrifices I had made, was a gut punch. How could they want me to stop? Hadn't I given everything to ensure their happiness and security? Hadn't I always been there when they needed me? I sat still for a moment, staring at the screen, trying to process the words. It didn't make sense. My mind raced, the questions swirling in my head. What did she mean by "we can't keep relying on you"? Wasn't I supposed to be the one they could always turn to? Had I really been too generous? Had I been enabling them? The guilt started to seep in, and I felt the weight of my choices bearing down on me. I took a deep breath and typed back a response. "What do you mean? You've been asking for help for years, Sophie. Now you want me to stop?" The response came almost immediately. Sophie's words were more carefully considered this time. But they still stung. "Yes, we've realized we've been taking advantage of you. We need to stand on our own 2 feet. We can't keep depending on you like this. It's not healthy for us. And it's not fair to you." The words felt like a slap in the face. For the first time, I saw their dependence on me not as a sign of love, but as something else, something I had been blind to for so long. They had come to expect that I would always be there, always ready to fix their problems, always ready to help them out of tight spots. And in doing so, I had made them dependent on me. I had given too much, and now I was being asked to stop. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't angry. Not at first. It was more confusion than anything else. How had it gotten to this point? Why was it wrong for me to help? Why was I now being asked to stop giving? I had always thought of my role as a mother as one that meant giving everything I had, no matter the cost. But now, I was being told that my giving had gone too far. "Are you sure about this?" I typed, my hands shaking as I pressed send. "You've always relied on me. How are you supposed to manage without my help?" The reply came quickly, but it wasn't as angry as I had feared. It was simply resigned. "We know it will be hard," Sophie wrote. "But we need to learn. We can't keep leaning on you for everything. We've been comfortable with your support, but we can't keep living like this." I sat there for a long while, staring at the screen. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. They were right. It wasn't healthy for them to keep depending on me. And it wasn't healthy for me, either. I had been the one who always stepped in, always made things easier, but in doing so, I had robbed them of the opportunity to grow on their own. I had never let them fail, never let them face the consequences of their choices, and now they were asking me to stop. The silence after the conversation was suffocating. For days, I heard nothing from Mark or Sophie. The house felt empty, not just in the literal sense, but emotionally as well. I had always been the one who held everything together, the glue that kept the family in place. And now, I had let go of that role. I had given up my position as the one they turned to, the one who fixed everything. It felt like I was drifting, unmoored from everything I had known. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had done the right thing. I had been the one enabling them, giving them a crutch to lean on instead of letting them face their own challenges. I had kept them in a state of dependency, and by doing so, I had stunted their growth. They needed to learn to stand on their own, to face their own consequences. It wasn't just about money. It was about teaching them responsibility, about showing them that they couldn't always rely on me. I had always given out of love, but I had never expected them to learn from it. I had been giving them the answers without letting them find them on their own. And that had to stop. I picked up the phone and called my financial advisor. "I need you to freeze all access to my accounts," I said, my voice steady. "Everything, no exceptions. I need to make sure they can't touch anything anymore." The silence on the other end was almost deafening. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, concern lacing his words. "I'm sure," I replied. "It's time for them to learn. It's time for me to stop." The next few days passed in a blur. I didn't hear from either of them. The silence was unnerving. But I didn't break. I didn't call them. Didn't check in. I had made my decision, and they needed to feel the weight of it. The phone call came a week later, and it was from Mark. "Mom, what's going on? We can't access anything. Why did you do this?" I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let it out slowly. I had prepared myself for this moment, but it didn't make it any easier. "I did it because it's time for you both to take responsibility for your lives," I said, my voice calm. "I've helped you, I've supported you, but now it's time for you to learn how to manage without me. I can't keep enabling you. You need to face the consequences of your actions." He was silent for a long time, and I could hear the frustration in his breath. "But we've always depended on you," he said softly. "We don't know how to do this on our own." "You will," I said, my voice steady. "You'll figure it out. I believe in you both. But you have to stand on your own 2 feet. The silence lingered a moment longer before he spoke again. "I understand, Mom. I'll try." The days after the call from Sophie felt like an eternity. The weight of my decision to cut off financial support for my family settled heavily on my shoulders. I had always been the one to jump in and help, to make things easier, to fix problems before they even became problems. But now, in the silence that followed Sophie's message, I was left alone with my thoughts, wondering if I had done the right thing. I had expected relief, but instead, I felt an uncomfortable mix of guilt and uncertainty. How could I just stop? How could I stop giving, stop helping, when I had always been the one they turned to? The silence in the house was oppressive, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the absence of my family in a way that was hard to ignore. The first few days were the hardest. I spent time thinking about everything I had done for them, all the sacrifices I had made over the years. It was always for them, always for their future. I thought I was helping. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I realized I had been enabling them. I had created a situation where they didn't need to rely on themselves. I had been the crutch that made their lives easier, but in doing so, I had taken away their ability to grow. I knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't undo what I had done, and I couldn't keep enabling them. But that didn't make it easier. It wasn't just about the money, it was about my role in their lives. They had come to expect that I would always be there, always ready to step in, and I had let them. As the days passed, I found myself distracted by my own thoughts. I couldn't focus on anything. I had spent so many years giving, so many years pouring myself into their needs, that I didn't know what to do with myself now. I had become so wrapped up in their lives that I had neglected my own. Now that I had set boundaries, I realized I didn't know who I was anymore, apart from being their caregiver, their provider. It wasn't just about the financial help. It was about what I had allowed myself to become. A mother who had given everything, but in the process, had lost herself. And now, I was being forced to confront the fact that they needed to grow on their own. Then, a week after the conversation with Sophie, I received a message from Mark. He hadn't called. He hadn't reached out. And I had started to wonder whether I had pushed them too far. But when the message popped up on my phone, my heart skipped a beat. "Mom, can we talk?" I stared at the screen, unsure of what to expect. Was he angry? Did he understand? I took a deep breath and called him back. The moment the phone rang, I braced myself for what was to come. "Mom," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I've been thinking a lot about what you did. About what you said. And I get it now." I felt a rush of relief. I hadn't expected this. This sense of understanding. Of acceptance. So soon. "You do?" I asked, trying to hide the emotion that threatened to slip into my voice. "I do," he said, and I could hear the sincerity in his tone. "I've been working more at the restaurant. Trying to pick up extra hours. I'm making a little more money. But it's hard, Mom. It's harder than I thought. But I know now that I need to do this. I need to figure it out on my own." I didn't know what to say. It wasn't just the relief I felt, but a quiet pride in hearing him take responsibility for his own life. "I'm proud of you, Mark," I said, my voice filled with warmth. "I really am. But you have to remember this won't be easy. You're going to face challenges. But you can do it. You have to trust yourself." "I know," he replied. "I just didn't realize how much I was relying on you. I was selfish, Mom. I was always waiting for you to fix things for me, and I never stopped to think about how that was affecting you. I'm sorry." I felt a lump in my throat. It wasn't easy to hear, but it was what I had needed. "It's not about being sorry, Mark," I said softly. "It's about learning. It's about realizing that you can do it. And that you're doing it. I'm here for you. But I can't keep fixing everything. You have to take responsibility for your own life." "I will," he said quietly. "I promise. I'll keep working. I'll keep figuring it out." The call ended, and I sat there for a moment, letting his words settle in. I didn't expect things to change overnight, but it was the first step. He was starting to understand the lesson I had been trying to teach him all along. Life wasn't about waiting for someone else to fix it for you. It was about taking control of your own destiny. Rachel's struggles. The next few days passed in silence. I didn't hear from Sophie or Mark. I wasn't sure if they were still angry or if they were simply figuring things out. The quiet felt suffocating at times. But I held firm. I knew they needed this time. They needed to face their own reality. Then, about a week later, I received a call from Rachel. I wasn't sure what to expect from her. We had always had a complicated relationship, and I didn't know how she would react to the changes I had made. "Mom," she said, her voice sounding strained. "I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" I agreed, though I felt a flutter of nerves in my chest. When we met at the cafe, I saw the same vulnerability in her eyes that I had seen in Mark's. She sat down across from me, her hands shaking slightly as she folded them together. "I've been thinking," she began, "about everything. About how you've always been there for us, and how I've taken you for granted. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had always known Rachel to be strong-willed, independent to a fault. But this was different. "You don't have to apologize, Rachel," I said gently. "You're learning, just like Mark. But this is the process. This is how you grow. You've made the choice to do it on your own, and I'm proud of that. But it's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. And you're going to struggle." "I know," she said, looking down at her hands. "I didn't realize how much I was relying on you. I thought I could do everything on my own. But I was still depending on you, in my own way. And now, I'm learning how to handle it. I've been looking for ways to improve the business. I'm trying. I really am. I nodded, not knowing what to say. She wasn't asking for help. She wasn't pleading for money or a handout. She was taking responsibility. And that was all I could ask for. I'm proud of you, Rachel, I said softly. I know it's hard, but you're doing the right thing. The weeks that followed my decision to stop supporting my family were a strange mix of relief and discomfort. At first, the silence felt freeing. No more constant calls for help, no more unexpected requests for money. No more feeling like I had to solve every problem that came their way. For the first time in a long while, I had my life to myself, and it felt good. I found myself doing things I had neglected for years, picking up hobbies I used to love, spending more time with my friends, and focusing on things that mattered to me. But as the days passed, the silence began to feel heavier. I had always been the one everyone turned to. For years, I had played the role of the savior, the one who made everything better. And now that role was gone, and so was the purpose that came with it. I found myself wondering, who am I without them? At the same time, I saw Mark and Rachel's struggles, and despite the distance, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. They were my children, after all. I had spent so many years taking care of them, helping them out of tight spots, and now they were trying to make it on their own. I knew it wasn't easy for them. In fact, it was incredibly difficult, but I also knew it was necessary. They needed to learn how to stand on their own 2 feet, just as I had. The phone rang one morning. It was Mark. His voice was different this time. Softer. Less defensive. I didn't know what to expect, but I wasn't prepared for what I heard. Mom, he said quietly, I've been thinking a lot about everything. I just wanted to say thank you. I was caught off guard. Thank you. For what? For making me do this. For making me stand on my own 2 feet. I've been working extra hours at the restaurant, and it's been tough. But I'm learning how to manage my own life. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm getting there. And I couldn't have done it without you pushing me. I felt my heart swell with a mix of pride and relief. Mark, I'm proud of you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I knew you could do it. But remember, it's not just about working hard. It's about taking responsibility for your choices. You're doing that now, and that's what matters. There was a long pause on the line before he spoke again, his voice full of sincerity. I know, Mom. I just want you to know that I see it now. I see what you were trying to teach me. I see how much you've done for us, and I'm sorry for not understanding sooner. I didn't know what to say to that. You're learning, Mark. And that's all I could have hoped for. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up the phone feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Mark was finally starting to see the value of independence. He was starting to understand the lesson I had been trying to teach him for years. A few days later, I heard from Rachel. Her message was short, but it was clear she wanted to talk. I had been waiting for this moment, but I wasn't sure what to expect. Would she be angry with me? Would she apologize? I didn't know, but I agreed to meet her at the same cafe we had always gone to. When I arrived, I saw her sitting by the window, her hands folded in front of her. There was a sadness in her eyes, but also something else. A quiet determination. She looked different than the woman I had known. There was a vulnerability in her that I hadn't seen before. Mom, she said as I sat down. I've been thinking a lot about everything. About how I've relied on you for everything. And I realize now that I've been selfish. Her words were like a punch to the gut, but they also felt like a breath of fresh air. For the first time, Rachel was admitting what I had been waiting for. She had always been so independent, so sure of herself, that I never thought she would acknowledge how much she had depended on me. I didn't realize how much I was taking from you, she continued, her voice filled with regret. I thought I could handle everything on my own, but I was still asking for your help without even realizing it. And now, I'm learning. I'm learning that I have to do this on my own. I didn't know what to say at first. I had always known Rachel was strong, but I had never expected her to admit that she had been wrong. "Rachel, I'm proud of you," I said softly. "I know it's not easy, but you're doing the right thing. You're taking responsibility for your life, and that's all I can ask for." "I know," she said quietly. "And I'm sorry, Mom. I've been so focused on trying to prove something to you, to Mark, to everyone, that I forgot why I started my business in the first place. I'm learning how to stand on my own 2 feet. I'll keep pushing, I promise." I smiled at her, a genuine smile of pride and love. "I know you will, Rachel. You're doing the work, and that's all that matters." The weeks passed, and as time went on, I saw the change in both Mark and Rachel. The challenges weren't over, but they were finally learning to face them head-on. Mark was taking responsibility for his finances and working harder than he ever had before. Rachel, though still struggling with her business, was refusing to give up. She was finding ways to improve, finding new clients, and working harder than ever. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As for me, I was starting to find my own rhythm. I wasn't needed in the way I had been before, but that didn't mean I was any less valuable. I had made the choice to step back, and in doing so, I had finally given myself the chance to focus on the things that mattered to me. I was no longer just the one who gave and gave. I was learning to live for myself, to take care of my own needs. But even as I enjoyed my newfound freedom, I knew this was just the beginning for all of us. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and there would be setbacks. But for the first time, I felt hopeful. They were learning, and in the process, I was learning too. The weeks that followed my decision to stop supporting my family felt like a mixture of relief and emotional turmoil. In the quiet that had settled in, I found myself struggling with a mixture of pride and regret. I had made the decision to stop financially enabling my son and daughter-in-law, to stop being the constant fixer in their lives. But now, I was left with the consequences of that choice. There was no more coming to the rescue, no more rushing to the phone every time they called asking for help. I had let go of the role I had always played, and that felt both terrifying and liberating. At first, the silence between us was palpable. I hadn't heard from them since the decision was made. And each day that passed without a phone call or message from Mark or Sophie made the quiet feel heavier. It was as if they were navigating their lives without the safety net I had always provided, and I wondered, with increasing frequency, if I had made the right choice. Was I being too harsh? Should I have continued to help, even if it meant sacrificing my own peace? The questions haunted me, and yet, I knew in my heart that I had done the right thing. But there was still something missing, a void in my life where the constant calls for help used to be. I had spent years being the one they turned to, the one they could rely on for everything. It had been my identity for so long. And now, I was expected to step back, to let them take responsibility for their own lives. But in doing so, I was losing a part of myself as well. It was as if my purpose had been taken from me, and I had no idea who I was without it. Days turned into weeks, and I began to adjust to the silence. I found myself focusing on things I had neglected for years. I picked up old hobbies that had fallen by the wayside, like painting and gardening. I spent more time with my friends, people I had lost touch with while I had been so consumed by my family's needs. I began to reconnect with myself in a way I hadn't done in years. But despite the newfound freedom, there was still an underlying sadness. I missed the sense of purpose that had come from helping them. I missed being the one they needed. Then, one day, I received a text from Mark. It wasn't a call, like I had expected, but it was enough to make my heart skip a beat. The message was simple, but it carried the weight of the months that had passed. "Mom, can we talk? I've been thinking a lot about everything." I stared at the message for a long time before I replied. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let him figure it out on his own, just as I had planned. But something inside me, some deep-rooted need to know if he had truly learned, made me reply. "Of course. When can we talk?" The response came quickly. He wanted to meet in person. I agreed, though my heart was racing in my chest. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew this conversation could determine whether my decision had worked, whether Mark had truly learned anything from the painful decision I had made. When I met him at the cafe, I barely recognized him. His usual confidence was replaced by something else. Something softer. More vulnerable. He sat across from me, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup, and for the first time in a long time he didn't look like the man who had taken me for granted. He looked like someone who had been forced to face the truth about himself, about us. "Mom," he began, his voice quiet. "I don't know where to start. I've been thinking about everything you said, about how I've relied on you for everything, how I've never had to take responsibility for my own life. And I get it now." I felt a rush of relief, mixed with a knot in my stomach. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when Mark would realize the gravity of what had happened. "I don't know what to say," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I've always turned to you for help, without even thinking about it. But now, I see how wrong that was. I see how much I've taken from you. And I'm sorry." I had never heard him apologize like that before. It wasn't just the words, it was the sincerity behind them. He wasn't asking for anything, wasn't trying to make excuses. He was owning up to the fact that he had relied on me, and it had hurt both of us. "I don't want to be that person anymore, Mom," he said, his voice steady now. "I'm working more hours at the restaurant, and it's tough. But I know I have to do this on my own. I can't keep depending on you. I have to figure it out." I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. I had been waiting for this moment, but hearing him say it out loud was more emotional than I had anticipated. "I'm so proud of you, Mark," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I knew you could do it. I've always known you could." There was a pause before he spoke again. "But you don't have to worry about me anymore. I'm taking responsibility. I'm learning. And I know it's going to take time. But I'll get there. I promise." I smiled at him through my tears. "I believe in you, Mark. I always have." Rachel's journey. The days after my conversation with Mark were filled with quiet anticipation. I hadn't heard from Rachel yet, and I knew her struggles with her business were far from over. But I wasn't sure if she would reach out, or if she was still angry with me for cutting them off. The silence between us had been heavy, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had done the right thing. Then, just as I was beginning to feel the weight of uncertainty, I received a call from Rachel. Her voice sounded different this time. Not defensive, not angry, but softer, almost vulnerable. "Mom," she began, her voice shaky. "I've been thinking a lot about what you did, about how you stopped helping us. And I have to admit, I didn't get it at first. But now, I see why you did it." I felt a knot in my stomach. "Rachel, I didn't want to hurt you. But I had to make you see that you needed to stand on your own." "I know," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I've been trying, Mom. My business is slow, but I'm getting better at it. I've been working on ways to improve it, reaching out to more clients, finding new strategies. It's not perfect, but I'm doing it. And I know it's because of what you did. You pushed me to do this. I couldn't keep living in your shadow." Her words hit me like a wave of relief. I had been waiting for this moment, the moment when Rachel would stop seeing me as her safety net and start seeing herself as capable of handling her own life. "I'm proud of you, Rachel," I said, my voice steady. "You're doing the right thing. You're learning. And that's all that matters." "I won't let you down, Mom," she said, her voice full of determination. "I promise." The weeks that followed my decision to stop supporting my family were a strange mix of relief and emotional turmoil. At first, the silence felt freeing. No more constant calls for help, no more unexpected requests for money, no more feeling like I had to solve every problem that came their way. For the first time in a long while, I had my life to myself, and it felt good. I found myself doing things I had neglected for years, picking up hobbies I used to love, spending more time with my friends, and focusing on things that mattered to me. But as the days passed, the silence began to feel heavier. I had always been the one everyone turned to. For years, I had played the role of the savior, the one who made everything better. And now that role was gone, and so was the purpose that came with it. I found myself wondering, who am I without them? At the same time, I saw Mark and Rachel's struggles, and despite the distance, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. They were my children, after all. I had spent so many years taking care of them, helping them out of tight spots, and now they were trying to make it on their own. I knew it wasn't easy for them. In fact, it was incredibly difficult, but I also knew it was necessary. They needed to learn how to stand on their own 2 feet, just as I had. The phone rang one morning. It was Mark. His voice was different this time. Softer. Less defensive. I didn't know what to expect, but I wasn't prepared for what I heard. "Mom," he said quietly, "I've been thinking a lot about everything. I just wanted to say thank you." I was caught off guard. "Thank you for what?" "For making me do this. For making me stand on my own 2 feet. I've been working extra hours at the restaurant, and it's been tough. But I'm learning how to manage my own life. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm getting there. And I couldn't have done it without you pushing me." I felt my heart swell with a mix of pride and relief. "Mark, I'm proud of you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I knew you could do it. But remember, it's not just about working hard. It's about taking responsibility for your choices. You're doing that now, and that's what matters." There was a long pause on the line before he spoke again, his voice full of sincerity. "I know, Mom. I just want you to know that I see it now. I see what you were trying to teach me. I see how much you've done for us, and I'm sorry for not understanding sooner. I didn't know what to say to that. You're learning, Mark." And that's all I could have hoped for. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up the phone feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Mark was finally starting to see the value of independence. He was starting to understand the lesson I had been trying to teach him for years. A few days later, I received another call. It was Rachel. She had been quieter lately, focusing on her business. But I could tell she was still struggling. Her voice was tentative, unsure of how to approach me. "Mom," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I know we haven't talked much lately, but I just wanted to say, I've been thinking a lot about what you did, about how you stopped helping us. And I have to admit, I didn't get it at first. But now I see why you did it." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "Rachel. What's going on? Are you okay?" "I am," she said, but her voice sounded fragile. I've been working so hard on the business, and it's not where I want it to be. But I see now that I've been relying on you in ways I didn't even realize. I thought I could do everything on my own, but I was still asking for your help, still expecting you to fix everything. And I've been taking you for granted." Her words cut through me, but not in the way I expected. Instead of feeling anger, I felt something else: pride. She was acknowledging what I had been trying to show her all along. That this wasn't about money, about handouts, but about learning how to be self-sufficient. "I'm proud of you, Rachel," I said softly, trying to steady my voice. "I know it's not easy. I know it's hard, but you're doing the right thing. You're learning to take responsibility for your own life, and that's all that matters." "I know, Mom, and I promise I won't stop. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm learning. I'm making the effort." The relief I felt after our conversation was almost overwhelming. I could hear in her voice the strength she had always had, buried beneath the weight of her expectations and the comfort of my support. She wasn't asking for help anymore. She was taking responsibility, and that was more than I could have ever asked for. As the weeks passed, Mark and Rachel's paths to independence continued to unfold. Mark was working extra hours at the restaurant, and I could see the pride in his eyes when he spoke about his progress. Rachel was still struggling with her business, but she wasn't giving up. She was researching, adjusting her strategy, and working hard to make her dream a reality. There were moments of doubt, of course. There always would be. But they were learning. They were growing. And I could finally see the fruits of my hard decision. As for me, I started to enjoy the space I had created. I wasn't weighed down by the constant demands. I had time to breathe, time to rediscover who I was beyond being the caretaker, the provider. I was still their mother, but I was also something else, someone who had the right to live for herself, to explore new passions, to enjoy life without constantly thinking about the next problem to fix. It wasn't an easy road, and there were still moments of doubt. I missed the chaos of their lives, the constant need for my help. But as I spent more time with myself, I realized that this was what I had needed all along. Space to breathe. Space to grow. Space to be. In this chapter, Eleanor begins to see the positive results of her decision. Both Mark and Rachel are learning to stand on their own, though it's a slow process. Eleanor, too, is finding herself again as she adjusts to her new role. This chapter focuses on the growth and change in all of their lives, marking the beginning of a new phase of independence and self-realization. The weeks that followed felt like a turning point. Mark and Rachel were no longer the same people they had been when I had first made the decision to stop helping. It wasn't an instant transformation, but I could see the changes in them, small at first, then gradually becoming more evident. The weight of their own responsibility had settled on their shoulders, and though they still faced challenges, there was a quiet pride in the way they carried themselves now. They were learning, growing, becoming the people I had always hoped they would be, people who could stand on their own. Mark had started working more hours at the restaurant. He had taken on extra shifts and was putting aside a portion of his earnings to save. It wasn't much, but it was something. He was no longer the young man who expected others to fix his problems. He was the one figuring it out, and with each passing day, the transformation in him became more apparent. His confidence had returned, not because of some external validation, but because he was taking control of his life, making choices that reflected his growing maturity. I could tell he was proud of his progress. There was a change in his voice when we spoke, a subtle but significant shift. No longer was he the one who asked for help now. He was telling me about his achievements, however small, with a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about responsibility. About learning that his actions had consequences, and that his future was in his hands. And then there was Rachel. She had always been independent, or at least, that's how I had always seen her. Her business, however, wasn't doing as well as she had hoped. The online store she had started to show some signs of promise, but it was clear that she had underestimated the amount of work it would take to succeed. Still, she didn't ask for help. Not this time. She kept working, researching new ways to improve her business, reaching out to potential clients, and, despite her doubts, she refused to give up. One evening, a few months after I had frozen their access, Rachel called me. Her voice was tentative, unsure of how to approach me, but when she spoke, there was a new energy to it, one I hadn't heard before. "Mom," she said, "I've been working hard and it's starting to pay off. The business is picking up. It's still slow, but I've learned so much. I didn't think I could do it, but I'm starting to believe I can." I smiled as I listened. I could hear the pride in her voice, the satisfaction of someone who had worked hard for something and finally seen results. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but she was making it work. "I'm proud of you, Rachel," I said, my voice steady. "You're doing the right thing. It's not going to be easy, but you're learning, and that's what matters most." "I know, Mom, I had to figure it out on my own, and I'm glad I did. I won't let you down again. I won't take you for granted anymore." Her words were a relief. I had feared that I had pushed them too far, that the distance I had created would push them away permanently. But this wasn't about distance. It was about growth, and they were growing, in ways that I hadn't expected, but in ways that were important. While I was proud of their progress, the pain of stepping back from my role as their constant support remained. It wasn't that I regretted the decision, on the contrary. I knew it was the right thing to do, but there were times when I missed being the one they relied on. There were moments when I felt like an outsider in their lives. They were becoming more independent, yes, but they were also becoming less dependent on me, and that left a hole. It was a strange, bittersweet feeling. On one hand, I had more freedom. I didn't have to worry about their financial struggles or their personal problems every day. I didn't have to solve their issues or step in when things went wrong. On the other hand, I missed the sense of purpose that came from being needed. I missed feeling like I was the center of my family's world. I missed the chaos, the constant motion of their lives. The change in our relationship was palpable. I could no longer be the one they called every time they needed help. Instead, they were calling to share their successes, their progress. It was both humbling and empowering to see them taking charge of their own lives. But it also left me wondering where I fit into this new dynamic. I had been the center of their world for so long that I didn't know how to adjust to the new reality. I was no longer the lifeline. I was no longer the one they could count on for everything. And though I knew it was the right thing for them, it was hard to let go of the role I had always played. But just as they were learning to take responsibility for their own lives, I was learning to let go. I was learning that love wasn't about fixing everything for them. It was about allowing them to learn, to grow, and to struggle. It was about understanding that I didn't need to be everything for them. I could be something for myself too. Months passed, and slowly, the changes became more evident. Mark had saved enough money to move into a small apartment on his own. He was still working at the restaurant, but he was proud of how far he had come. He no longer needed me to bail him out. He was making it on his own, and though he still called from time to time for advice, he was no longer the same person who had relied on me for everything. Rachel had expanded her business, and while it was still small, she was seeing growth. She had learned how to market her products, how to manage her finances, and most importantly, how to handle the ups and downs of running a business. She still had a long way to go, but I could see the woman she was becoming. The woman who was no longer afraid to fail, but determined to succeed. And as I watched them both, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They weren't perfect, and they still had a long road ahead, but they were learning. They were growing. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about them learning to stand on their own, to take responsibility for their choices, and to build lives they could be proud of. And as for me, I was learning too. I wasn't the same person I had been when I made the decision to cut them off. I had rediscovered parts of myself that I had forgotten in the process of being their caretaker. I had found my own independence, my own passions, and my own purpose. I no longer defined myself by my role as a mother who gave everything to her children. I had finally learned to live for myself. As I sat quietly in the warmth of my living room one evening, the world outside was calm, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating the familiar surroundings of my home. There was a time when these walls had been filled with the sound of phone calls, the constant hum of family life, of my children needing me, calling out for my help, asking for advice, for money, for comfort. But now, after months of adjustment, everything felt different. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was peaceful. The emotional weight of the past year had been immense, but it had also been a period of growth not just for Mark and Rachel, but for me as well. I could see it now, clearly, and without any doubt. They were standing on their own, navigating the rough waters of adulthood, and while it wasn't perfect, they were trying. They were learning from their mistakes, facing their failures, and inching closer to becoming the people I had always hoped they would be. I had learned too. I had learned to let go of the role I had always played in their lives, the role of the provider, the fixer, the one who made everything better. I had learned that being a good mother didn't mean always solving their problems, didn't mean always being the one to pick up the pieces. It meant giving them the tools they needed to solve their own problems, to pick up their own pieces. And it wasn't easy. It was painful, at times, to step back, to stop being their safety net. But it was necessary. For them. For me. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was Mark. I had been hearing from him more lately, and each time, the conversation was different. He was no longer calling to ask for help or money. He was calling to update me on his life, on the small victories he was experiencing. I could tell he was growing, and I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. "Hey, Mom," Mark said when I answered. "I just wanted to call and let you know that I got promoted at work. They're giving me more hours, and I'm finally making enough to cover all my bills without having to rely on anyone." I felt a warmth spread through me. The words, "I'm proud of you," were stuck in my throat, but I forced them out. "Mark, that's amazing. I knew you could do it. I don't know if I would have gotten here if you hadn't pushed me," he admitted, his voice sincere. "I know I've made mistakes, and I know I've taken you for granted, but I'm getting there and I'm not looking back." I smiled, a tear slipping down my cheek. "You've done the work, Mark. You've earned it." We talked for a little while longer, and as we ended the call, I couldn't help but feel that a chapter had closed, one that had been filled with doubt, guilt, and struggle, but now, it was over. Mark had found his footing. And that was all I had ever wanted for him. That evening, after the call with Mark, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. But just as I was settling into that peace, my phone rang again. This time, it was Rachel. I hadn't heard from her in a few days, and I wondered what she had been up to. I picked up the phone with a quiet anticipation, unsure of what to expect. "Mom," she began, her voice hesitant at first, but then it grew stronger. "I just wanted to let you know that my business is picking up. It's not where I want it to be yet, but it's growing. I'm learning how to handle everything on my own, and I'm not asking for your help anymore. I've been doing the work, and I can see the results. It's slow, but it's working." I felt a tear slip down my cheek as I listened to her. "Rachel, I'm so proud of you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I know it's not easy, but you're doing it. You're standing on your own." "I know, Mom," she replied, "and I'll keep going. I won't give up." The call ended, and I sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on everything that had happened. It had been such a difficult journey, full of doubt and uncertainty, but I could finally see the results. Mark and Rachel were no longer the people they had been. They were independent, self-sufficient, and on their way to becoming the adults I had always hoped they would be. And I, too, had become someone different. I had learned to let go, to stop being the one who fixed everything. I had learned to live for myself, to take care of my own needs, and to rediscover who I was outside of being their caretaker. The quiet that had settled in over the past few months now felt like a calm before the storm of what was to come. It was a new beginning for all of us. For Mark and Rachel, it was a time of growth and change. For me, it was a time of rediscovery, of learning to live for myself again. The road hadn't been easy, and there would still be challenges ahead, but for the first time, I felt like we were all on the right path. As the days went on, I realized that my decision to stop helping had been the catalyst for this transformation. It had been the push they needed to step up, to face the world on their own. And for me, it had been the wake-up call I needed to stop defining myself by my role in their lives. I was still their mother, but I was also more than that. I was Eleanor. I was someone who had a life of her own, a future to look forward to, and a self-worth that didn't depend on being the one who always gave.